welcome. I'm back for a second time. I'm just going to get my notes up because we have quite a big subject here. And to discuss this subject, we have some very, very diverse skill set types of people on this panel. So, to kick off, music and supporting industries have proven to have highly transferable skills with the growing demand outside of traditional roles in music. So we're looking at where opportunities may exist in the convergence sector. And what I mean by convergence, it's not just a big word I'm trying to confuse you with, is looking at how creative media is kind of all coming together into closer proximity. We're looking at how film, game, social media, broadcast, podcast, theatre, all these different things have a lot of transferable skill sets, and musicians actually have a lot of those skill sets. So, to begin with, I just want to have a very quick, I don't want to spend ages introducing ourselves, but if we could just go from the panel, from Tim to Stu, and obviously to Tom, just tell us a little bit about what you do.
I guess, hey guys, big headline with me is that I am a new music Twitch streamer. Does anyone know Twitch? Anyone watch Twitch in here? Yeah, cool. So if I call you chat, you'll get it, and we can all cringe together. So my background is that I worked in new music radio. I wanted to do radio ever since I discovered it at uni. Graduated, and I did a philosophy degree, so I didn't have any other useful career paths. So I ended up working a lot in Birmingham music and getting involved with BBC introducing in the West Midlands, and eventually BBC Radio 1, where I worked behind the scenes, as well as One Extra and BBC Asia Network. A few years ago, I kind of transitioned what I was doing with new music over to Twitch. So Twitch is a video streaming platform. A lot of people know it for gaming, but currently I host a weekly new music show there, amongst other streams, where just like a normal radio show, except there's a live chat, live camera. And I also host my own gig night called B-Town, which is a monthly gig night in Birmingham.
I'm Stu Hanna. I'm a folk musician and producer as well. Pretty a lot more old school than Twitch. I do know what Twitch is, but I don't use it. I don't use TikTok. But we do use social media. I first started playing in punk bands, and my wife persuaded me to pick up an acoustic guitar and try some folk songs, and we recorded an album in our basement, sent it to Bob Harris, who used to run a show on Radio 2, and he played it and went on from there and developed a career out of that. And now we travel around singing in rooms like this with about the same amount of chairs to people, that's how we make our living.
I'm Tom MacPherson, and my background is sort of major labels, I would say. I started off as a radio plugger back in the day. That was kind of early 2000s. And then I moved to EMI. Then EMI got bought by Universal, and I managed to transfer over to Universal. And I was doing global marketing for all of our kind of UK releases going out around the world. And then in 2020, I made the switch into artist management. So I've been managing artists for the last 6 years. I've got one artist at the moment signed to Sony, one signed to Universal, and another artist that's just hit 1 billion streams on Spotify with one of their tracks.
That is fantastic. So quick question. Are you or have you ever been a musician?
I can play piano.
Okay.
I make music recently as more of a hobby. I'm actually very, very lucky that I'm friends with a lot of really talented musicians. There's a few of them at the back of the room. Shout out to Moleface, Arch DeRojo. Excited for the set later. I know musicians. I feel like what I do compared to them, I wouldn't really call music. Okay. But I'm more of a DJ. I'm more here to play other actually talented people's music.
Okay. But you do have a performative element to what you do?
Let's say it's a hobby sometimes. Okay. Mostly not, though.
What about you, Tom?
Yeah, I was a committed musician for throughout my teenage years. I actually went to the Brit School, and that was kind of where I managed to get into the industry. But I'd obviously realised at college that I was a terrible guitarist, and it probably wasn't going to be, where I was going to be at. So sort of shifted into the music industry side of things.
Interesting, because when I get asked to describe myself, whether I'm on a panel or I'm meeting somebody, I have to think about it. because I have different hats for different things. I guess I'm a multi-disciplined, creative tech person and a musician and a filmmaker, all of which I've done at a very high level. And it's difficult to sort of, depending on the conversation you have, to pigeonhole yourself like that. And that's kind of where I'm coming from with this panel, and where some of these questions have come in, which our students have been curating for us as well. So looking at this, what skill set does it take to be a musician these days, do we think?
I think the big problem is that it has changed quite a lot, because if you asked this question 30 years ago, it would be a very obvious answer. You need to be able to play guitar or a different instrument, and you need to be quite good at, I guess, meeting people. But I think we've seen in the last 20 years that every person in music kind of has to be a bit of a social media manager in the early days. So I would say that very prominently now, you need to be quite savvy with social media. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm sure we'll get into. I think the main thing you need to be able to do as a musician now is kind of create music that sells an idea to people that they invest in. It's like fan culture, stan culture has become so dominant in music. If you look at fans of bands like BTS or artists like Billie Eilish, there's clearly a personal element. And even smaller artists, I can think of artists like Nivella, who's really cool coming up. There's clearly like a personal dynamic with them. So I think artists now, the main skill you need to have is probably often using social media to build a bit of a personal investment between yourself and an audience.
Yeah, I'd kind of go wide on that and even say like anyone can be a musician, and the music that anyone makes, regardless if they make a career for it, is worth doing. And you know, the more I'll go through, the more I see the benefit of that. People making music in the 80s, but the difference between a musician and a professional musician is a professional musician is making money, making income from it. So I think you've always got to go to, okay, well, where's my income coming from? What's the income source? Is it getting a record deal? Is it getting streams? Is it, like for myself, it's selling tickets on the door? So I've got to know promoters and our fans. I suppose they're the two things you've got to constantly think about.
So you've got good communication skills?
You've got to, absolutely, yeah. And you'll know about it. It's about knowing the people that are going to give you the money and why are they going to give you it. You know, what you're going to do in return, and socializing. I imagine when you first into artist management, you've got to do lots of socializing with the people that are going to make the decisions, the people that are going to control the budgets, who's spending the money. They want to work with you, and across all industries, I think people work with people they enjoy working with, don't they? You know, especially in music, and especially in the arts. You know, there's not lots of money in it, so you want to work with people you enjoy working with. So being nice to people and being a fun person to work with, I think, is an important skill set.
So Tom, with your kind of broad outlook on it, with artist management, you see the bigger picture. You know, give us your take on what the modern.
I mean, it's God, there's so much, isn't it? I mean, but ultimately it comes down to, I think, absolutely right, relationships. You know, it's a relationships industry. It's learning how to communicate with people, communicate with the audience, communicate with the industry, communicate with a radio presenter, a journalist, an interview. Like all of these things are so vital. But you know, from my point of view, starting off as a radio plugger, I didn't even know what radio plugger was. But it taught me sales, it taught me promotion, it taught me to think about what does this radio presenter or this producer want to hear? What information is it that's going to sort of make them play this record? And that's the sort of key thing. So you can apply that to anything. So as you say, if you're a new artist trying to get a booking agent, you've got to try and sort of figure out, well, how do I convince this agent to come on board? And all they really care about is, can this artist sell tickets? So I've got to convince them. How do I show them I can sell tickets? And you have to do that on your own at the start, because you probably won't have a manager to, you know, help you out. So you've got to kind of learn all of this stuff. And it's like, as an artist, you wear many hats. As a manager, you wear many hats. The game, the job has changed so much, but it teaches you so much, doesn't it? It really does.
Yeah, I suppose resilience is the key thing. Yeah, keep it going. And you learn that as an artist. If you're doing a lot of times, that you're going to have 19 out of 20 approaches or tries at things you're getting a knock back. And there's nothing more personally, what's the word, risky as a performer standing up, performing your own work, or sending it to someone and being rejected. You know, you're putting yourself on the line, and it does hurt when it gets rejected, and it will get rejected many times. Even now, we book shows, and you know, as an artist, I book our own shows. We play at the same rooms about this size. You know, I've got to write 19 emails to get one show, and these are with people that I know as well. So you can't be too personally upset about it. You've got to develop that resilience, you know.
And that's the insane thing about being a musician these days is, on the one hand, when you're creating music, when you're writing, you're bearing your soul. You're putting yourself out there to be judged, and you know, you have no idea how that's going to work out. But then at the same time, so you're kind of bearing your soul, and then you've got to be a salesman. Then you've got to sort of market yourself and all these things. So you've got this constant tension. And not all artists are going to be comfortable in front of the camera. They're not all, you know, because a lot of artists are introverted by their nature. So how do you figure that out? How do you find your audience on TikTok if you are actually quite introverted? There's always a way, but you just got to try and figure that out.
So looking at, there's a lot of facets to being a musician in the modern day, right? So what about technical skills? And what I mean by that is that we brush on, you've got to be on social media, but what does it take to be on social media? You've got to make your own videos, right? You've got to record your own music to get it out there. Is that important?
I think the thing that I feel at the moment is maybe the industry have drawn some false parallels with TikTok, where it's like, if you're a big TikToker, then your music will be really well streamed. And an example I like to use is Glass Animals, because they had a track, Heat Waves, in lockdown, which was ridiculously popular. It became one of the biggest songs in the world, and that band basically launched their career. They were already earning money off it, obviously, but that launched them. And I think when I looked back on what they were actually doing on TikTok, they are more of an introvert band. They're not your very kind of like, get ready with me kind of artists. And it was just Dave, the lead singer, put up a video of his cat with that, or it was his dog with Heat Waves as a clip. And they had less followers than another artist I knew who was on TikTok, who did videos every single day, but then you look at the streams on Spotify and they had, I think, 25 million at the time. And the other guy I knew had like 6,000 or 7,000. So I think it's important to find a way that actually suits you and not let anyone, maybe like people you're talking to in the industry or out of the industry, shoehorn you into becoming a content creator, because that's kind of like my job. It's not your job as a band to be a content creator. So I think the key skill is actually find a way to make videos or whatever that gets your music seen by people on these platforms that have that power without like losing the will to live in the process. Because it won't work if you kind of resent what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and it doesn't represent you.
Yeah, interesting, because some of that goes against my principles as a music video director. I produce really beautiful looking films, and actually, if an artist does that of themselves, it doesn't look as authentic. It looks a bit over-curated. So maybe with social media, that less polished element might work as well. But just pulling away from that a sec. So, as a musician, Stu, do you do any work outside of your band? Do you loan yourself out as an instrumentalist?
Like across like the about 20 years that I've been doing it, I've done various different things. So, and again, it got back to like, who do you know at the time? So I don't know if you know, the proper music distribution were a big thing. There were the music distributors in the folk scene, came out of Topic Records. They kind of still exist now. But I used to live near their warehouse in Southeast London, and so I got to know the managers, the people that ran it, and they needed someone to do some A&R work for them at the time. So I ended up doing that just because we used to drink down the same pub. And there's many jobs that I've done just because you know the people, but also because you're passionate about the same things. You've got something you can talk about, you know, whether it's the Twitch or whatever, you know, or the TikTok. You know, you find something with a group of people that you have something in common with, and you end up doing things for them, especially if they're people that are making decisions about how money is being spent. They need an A&R person. I was a hopeless A&R person because everyone would send the records, and I didn't want to say no to anything, and then I didn't actually have that much money to spend in the end, so it was rather depressing. But I did that. But I did lots of record production as well in the folk scene. You know, there's not huge budgets, but 20 years ago there was more, So the artists were looking for a producer, and because I knew some of the record label people that were spending the money, they said, "Oh, go and use Stu." So by knowing those people, and I knew how to make folk records because I did it myself. So again, I suppose diverse skill set allowed me to capitalize on those contexts. Yeah, but as as 20 years ago, I think one of the questions in this panel is how things have changed. Whatever. Yeah. 20 years ago, there was a market for recorded music in the folk scene, but now there isn't. We sell souvenir CDs at the end of gigs, but they're just souvenirs because everyone listens to that same music a different way usually. Yeah. So, okay. But now, do other bits of session playing and things like that still.
Cool. Right. So, okay, here's a good one. A misconception of musicians and people working in the industry is that music careers are narrow. I think we're sort of already showing that they're not. But what are some of the transferable skills that have developed since you've worked in the industry? And I think this could apply to all of us, would it really?
Yeah, I mean, I think an obvious example for me is that being in radio, I kind of learned audio production. Like, I was editing montages together for like Greg James and people like that. And now I work in podcasting as my day job. Does anyone like history podcasts? Kind of shot in the dark. Anyone Dan Snow? Yes, I work for History Hit. There you go. That's my day job. So shout out to them. And that's transferable. I think we're seeing that as a big trend at the moment. A lot of radio presenters. Even I saw this week Harriet Rose, who's an amazing young presenter on KISS, just left KISS to focus solely on her own podcast. And I think the radio industry is in that transitionary phase right now where there is a shift towards podcasting. In my creative industry, with music radio, those are transferable skills in production to podcasting, and presenters as well. I think they can kind of apply their trade, TV, radio, and then a lot of them are coming onto the video podcast sphere as well now.
Yeah, Stu?
Yeah, I'm not sure how many transferable skills that I've got outside of, it's fairly niche, the folk scene, I suppose, but I have developed a joy of teaching more the skills that I've picked up across the time. Any opportunity I get to talk about the journey that I've had as a musician, I really enjoy. Maybe because my wife's sick of listening to me talk, so I like speaking to other people. I work with my wife usually, we tour around together. So talking with other people about it, I really enjoy. And I've started running, I run songwriting workshops and kind of masterclasses and things like that, because I love talking about the creative process of how songs start from the roots upwards, particularly in the older generation. You see lots of people in the 60s and 70s who have a lifetime of stories, and there's no better way to tell those stories than through song. The songs might not be million-selling streams, but some of them, they tell amazing stories, and there's I enjoy doing that. And you know what, there's a market for it more and more. The folk scene was big in the 60s, and so the generation that are retired, they're big into folk as well, and so they're looking for something to do. So
Yeah.
Do you, if you don't mind me asking, do you do your own artwork and merch designs and kind of all of that sort of side of things?
Yeah. So folk scene is full of people. It's very cottage industry. So yeah. Not always. We'll bring in friends to do bits of illustration. I used to work for, there's a company called Big Active. Anyway, there was a London design company, so I used to get them to do the design, music design for me. And I still borrow friends for various things, but I know how to use Photoshop to see the artwork from time to time. Flyers, which I've got some at the back. I'll push them out. You've got to do these things.
You're running business.
Yeah, exactly.
You're CEO of your business.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I suppose you're a bit like your own little white van man. You're your own small business. So those skills are very much transferable to other industries.
Well, I think it's interesting because you started your point off by saying, well, not really outside of the folk scene, and then you just described this massive skill set of different, really transferable skills, which you have, which you could take anywhere else if you wanted to. If you wanted to be a Photoshop editor, you could do that. If you wanted to be a graphic designer, you could do that. If you wanted to be a podcast editor, you could do that. There's so many transferable skills in what Stu was like telling us there. And it's interesting that kind of idea of like a Swiss Army man. Do you know what I mean by that? That's kind of how I see myself a lot of the time. It's like, right, which little tool do we need today? And and it's interesting with musicians. I think there is so much more to it these days than there was, and I think that's at the core of what this panel is about.
It's a very freelance industry, isn't it? And if you're a freelancer by nature, you have to be entrepreneurial, and you have to get clients, and you have to promote yourself, sell yourself, and obviously whatever you're selling has to be relevant for whoever's going to employ you or take you on. So it's it's really important.
Yeah, and with that, I suppose what I'd like to touch on there is saying that, look, this is saying for musicians and non-musicians as well who are working in the creative sector or the supporting industries. In those times where you're not doing the thing that you exactly want to be doing, and we're not all making our best album 100% of the time, we're not all working on the best creative projects wherever. I'm not making music videos every day. What do I do when I'm not doing that? Well, I freelance as an event tech consultant. I work as a video editor. I work as a music producer and engineer, all of which pays money and all of which can pay the bills. So there's such a huge scope within the creative sector that shows that diverse skill sets are there.
And I think as well as a musician, like if you're in a band, if you're an artist, it's really important to not feel like you're doing something wrong if you're actually having a career like alongside your music. Maybe like if you're a younger or a student, you might just kind of have a part-time job or something. But I know a lot of quite successful bands like have full-time careers. And it's fine. It's not like, oh, I'm failing because I'm not doing music full time. And then you have more money to like invest in your music, and hopefully at some point down the line you can transition across into music full time. It's like you don't have to, be living on a shoestring and just 100% focusing on music if you're not like getting paid for it. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, folk scene is full of that. I mean, most of the musicians will do something else. Lots of teachers. Lots of many that do lots of different things, and you're finding a level that suits you, the amount of work you want to take up, because you'll get people that, especially in the folk scene, maybe will do it for a while, and then it's not worth travelling to Aberdeen for 30 quid gig, so they'll do the shows that are worth doing for them, they get the benefit out of, and especially gets down to the difference between a musician and a professional musician are quite blurred, really. It's just the amount of work you want to take on. But I suppose one thing you would say is the difference between professional and being unprofessional is the skills that you learn in terms of turning up on time, delivering your work on time. They become very important. The people that get the work are the people that aren't just good, they are professional in the standards, and that's important. And it's funny, you're talking about technology and how it's changed various industries. One of the bit of technological advice that you see on the singer-songwriter scene, the folk scene, is people turning up to a gig without a tuner that they can plug into the floor, plug your guitar into a tuner, and that mutes it. You can keep your guitar in tune, and it means the audience aren't listening to your tuning. So that's the bit of technology that I'd say invest in as a singer-songwriter or folk musician.
Fantastic. So, with that, I think we've kind of answered that question on the diverse skill sets.
I've got some questions. In terms of artists, the artists you're managing now, how do you advise they approach not that we do the social media, the TikTok and the like, to enable a successful career for them?
So, sorry, elaborate on that.
So, the bands that you manage, do they run their own social media accounts, and what do you advise them to do to advance their careers? I mean,
it's an interesting one. So the band who are doing very well at the moment, they obviously have a team around them. Yeah. So, but that team, is absolutely integral to the campaign. That's our shop window. That's how we communicate what we're doing when we announce tours, all of those things. Because we're not posting ourselves, we have to make sure that the tone is right, and it's right for our audience, and we're not repeating ourselves, and it's got to be different and interesting, and it's a huge amount of pressure. It's a huge amount of pressure to constantly do that, And some artists, some of the smaller artists that I work with, you know, they absolutely manage their own accounts and they do it, you know, their way. I've got a composer who's releases his own music, but he spends much of the time composing for films. And you know, he's not a kind of someone that will necessarily always promote himself, but he's got a very wry sort of, you know, dry sense of humour, and that just comes across really well. And the most important thing, as we've said before, is that you just have to be yourself. You have to be, you know, comfortable. You have to be authentic, and people will be drawn to that. Just like when you speak to someone, you know, when you meet them for the first time, you know, you want to have that connection. If you're trying to be something you're not, people see through that immediately. So it totally depends, whatever level you are. But, you know, for emerging artists, you have to learn everything. You have to edit. You have to think about the visual look, the kind of, the themes, the stories you're telling, the narrative. You have to be good at writing. And, you know, all of those things have to be essential. And hopefully you'll then start earning enough money where you can pay someone else to do it. Or one of your fellow students who, you know, can help you out, you know, for their benefit as well.
Or you could use any one of those skills to go and make more money yourself doing those very things that you've learned in order to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just about getting, not just, you know, musicians and people in the creative sector to look at that convergence of how these sectors are coming together. You know, we mentioned podcast. Listening to the podcast is huge now, right? And there's obviously the conversational podcast, there's the narrative podcast, there's the documentary podcast. How much music is in those now, you know? And now we've got immersive sound now. That's like binaural, so you're listening in your earpods, but you're getting sound almost in surround all around you. That takes composition, that takes sound design. All of those are skill sets that people from a musical and supportive industries background have, and the opportunities are there. So I think sometimes we can lament that the music industry is struggling a bit, and we've talked about today, you know, vertical integration of ticketing companies, or one ticketing company in particular, taking everything. We're looking at it, we've talked about AI making it more difficult for artists, or where the opportunities are as well, I'm sure. But actually, there is a lot there. It's just that the industry has diversified and it's got broader. It's not just about making music anymore. And I think that's a really valuable sort of lesson. If anyone's got anything else to add, I might open it up to the floor now to see if
I guess the thing that it made me think with that is I think it's very easy to be kind of fatalistic right now, and Ticketmaster definitely, or if it's bad naming them, I'm sorry, but whoever deserves to be called out. But for me, as someone who runs a monthly gig night in a 200 cap venue, and I hire indie bands, it costs us like £150 to do that gig, and we sell tickets at £5. So I see loads of people liking posts online and sharing posts online saying like, oh, it's awful, Ticketmaster should do this, grassroots music, this venue's closing, there needs to be something. And really, what would help me directly, just pay artists, because we pay them 100% of profit, or last year 100% of all ticket sales when we got funding, is if all the people liking those posts just bought a £5 ticket to the gig. Because then we sell 33, we're in profit, we pay the artist. As simple as that, 100% of it. And I think the power is very much with you guys, like with all of you. It would be amazing if Ticketmaster or like big labels would give independent venues a cut of their profits. But even then, like for me as an independent promoter, for probably someone who's a grassroots artist, the likelihood then of you seeing any of that money is quite low. But really, we have more power than we ever had. It just takes actually acting on things and going, do you know what, I am going to buy a £5 ticket. I am going to go out on a weekday evening and see bands that I don't necessarily know. And then that economy starts to grow. So yeah, the power is actually with the people, I think, in a lot of cases with grassroots music today.
Cool. Right, let's open it up to the floor. Do we have any questions? We have one down here. We can start right here, and then we'll come to the gentleman at the back there, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Is there a way, because I find myself in that position of hating my life when I do content. And so, you know, I don't know if there's a way of trying to make content. And it's not that I don't know. I actually used to make a lot of short films with classmates in high school, so I know a lot of video editing. but I just can't bring myself to do it. I already made a whole album. Why do I also have to make all the videos?
You know what? You sound like my wife, but sometimes in the because we're a duo, and sometimes we've got a gig in a month's time or a tour. I'm like, okay, we've just rehearsed. We need to do a little video as well for our social media is kind of important, but not in the same way as is for other genres of music. But we still feel the pressure. We know we need to tell our audience, and it's via Facebook because our audience mainly uses Facebook. So we need to do a little video or a cheesy picture or something to put on. Oh, here's the tour dates, and you know that they will only see the tour dates if the picture or the video is good enough, because the way the weird algorithm works, if they can sense that you're not into it or whatever, it just doesn't show it to your fans. So you do feel that pressure. And sometimes I'm like, I'll feel like I can't be bothered. I like performing. I love performing. Obviously, I do it. But that idea of creating content is really somehow socially demanding of me, emotionally demanding in a way that playing the guitar and writing a song isn't. And I must say, I do really feel for the generation of musicians now that are coming through, feeling that they always have to create this content, because I'm not sure if the duo that I performed with, we'd have been around, if it had been like that then, that we'd have been as successful, because we, rather than do that, we'd just go around every open mic folk club gig in London at the time, play, and socialise, and that's how we spread our word, and eventually making records. I don't think sitting at home making content, we'd have done that. One thing I would say is when I first used to work as I was in a punk band, and I did work with some friends who were in the pop scene as well. And I found it very uncomfortable being a performer in certain circumstances. The bits of dealing with fans and that interaction I found really difficult. And at one point something changed where I suddenly stopped seeing it as myself doing that, and I saw it as a professional version of myself going through the process of doing it, almost switching something where you can just, okay, oh, thank you, yeah, I'll sign that, yeah, that's nice, and then go off, and then almost like flick a switch and relax, and be yourself, and same with performing. So the only bit of advice that I'd give is try and do that. Try and imagine there's another part of yourself where you can flick a switch and be that content creator, even if for 20 minutes or whatever. And it's not that what you create won't be yourself and won't be authentic. It's just that the attitude that you approach it with might be a bit different. I don't know if that will work.
So I think it's BS that you even have to, or feel like you have to. I think the industry has kind of failed artists like you. So firstly, I don't think that you should have to. But in a practical sense, it would probably get your music in front of more people to do it. The thing that I feel now is if Tom York and Radiohead started today, what would they have to do to get signed? And can you imagine Tom York in this? It's a joke. It's a joke. And how many Radioheads are we missing? Like, how many Radioheads are we missing because the ecosystem has got to this point? And I think the artists that get signed often, they might be the ones who produce the best short-form videos, but when it comes to making an album, the end game isn't always there, because the ones who make the best albums and have long music careers aren't the ones who always make the best TikToks. So firstly, like, I would love to play your music on my show. I think it's people like my job to do that, it shouldn't be yours. In a practical sense, you said you make short films, right? So you like that? Maybe you could just do a little video of, here's a short film I made with my music underneath, I'm an artist. And hopefully just making a short video like that, you'd feel, you don't have to show your face on it, you don't even have to show your voice. Just something like CapCut, it's not the worst thing in the world to use. And finding a way to, survive and not like lose the will to live is key.
And then I guess not getting disappointed if you did do that method, if it failed, because it might fail, it might just reach no response, not being disappointed by that, then thinking, okay, but maybe having like 4 approaches. And that way you've got some alternatives. If the first one fails, you go, okay, let's try the second one, and not having that that feeling too demoralized, because as artists we can be like that. We can feel really crushed by things. So try and find emotionally managing a way around that, I think is the trick. Yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't always have to be artist facing. You know, maybe 10%, because obviously you do sort of. I think it's important that you have that element so people can sort of see who you are, but it doesn't always have to be you on every single post. And if you can find different ideas and try and experiment, you know, then there are ways you can do it which don't put you under so much pressure. You know, as I said, especially if you're introverted.
Cool. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to stretch this session out a little bit longer than intended. We've got the leeway to do so, so we're going to do it. I was going to address you that as well really quickly. Look, if you're not happy with the ecosystem that you're in, change the ecosystem. You know what I mean? And that may sound like an easy thing for me to say, but if you don't want to, then instead of engaging with that, just stay in the real world with it. Just go and, do you know what still works? Going to gigs and handing out flyers and talking to people works. Whenever I do that, my gigs are much better attended than they are just by engaging in that other world. You can reject it if you want to and just create a community of your own, or reach out to other people and create a scene. You know, come to this thing, get someone else to film it for you, and then you don't have to play that game of, hey, I'm doing this, you know, because a lot of people hate that kind of stuff. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, if you want people to come to your show, go and ask them personally,
Yeah.
personal invite. They'll feel emotionally invested in it, and you know, you can generally charm people if you ask them. Even if you're introverted and you're asking someone, I've got a show, you know, I would call it CB2. We used to do shows 20 years ago, travel up from London to play at the was Thirst. Or it used to be called CB2.
CB2s, yeah.
Down in the basement there, you know.
Is that with Phil Pethiebridge? With Phil Pethiebridge?
Bernard Hoskins.
Before that.
Anyway. Yeah, so invite people personally. You know, you've got a lovely smile. I can see that. If you smiled and asked people to come to your show, they will come to your show, even if your music's rubbish, which I don't think it is.
Right, I do want to get that other question, and it was at the back there.
So I'm interested to hear your opinion on this, Tom, as someone who's managed artists. But I'm an artist I'd like to work independently through my whole career and do it full time. Do you think in this world it's viable with all the gatekeeping, or is it too much of a workload not to go through a label to do that as an independent person, do you think?
That's a really good question. In an ideal world, yes, of course. I think every artist would love that opportunity to be earning enough, you know, money, income and revenue to kind of, you know, give up the day job, as it were. But the reality is that that's not an option in the early days. So it's a different one. I mean, I teach the music business course here, and this is a conversation we have all the time. And it's okay. It's like, how can you think of all the ways that you could potentially make money and build your business? And it's, you know, if you can kind of look yourself in the mirror and said, I have thought of absolutely everything. I have planned every single release from, you know, 6 months out. You know, I know exactly what I'm doing. Everything's prepared. I've got dates lined up. I've got my kind of, you know, even just a couple of simple merch items, but just something. If you've got all of that, then you're going to be in a good place. Whether that's going to guarantee income, you know, it's a really, really difficult one to say. But as we're kind of discussing, if you've got a parallel job going on that can help support that, then you'll be in a good position. And hopefully, if you work hard enough and you really, really, really drill down to like who you are as an artist or a band, then you will find a way. And then if you start get to that point where you get label interest, you've maybe got a manager or booking agent, and you can see your income coming up, you can forecast what you're going to do, then you might be able to sort of do a part-time job and just kind of keep things going. And then hopefully, when things go really well, it's just like, brilliant, I can focus on this 100%. But it's difficult, but, you know, I just think there's so much opportunity out there. You know, it feels overwhelming, but there's so much opportunity. There's so many different ways of contacting your fans and finding your people. And honestly, the music business, you know, I know it's difficult in terms of the economics, but in terms of how much revenue has been made, how many people are going to see tickets, concerts, how many people are buying tickets. Like, music has never been more accessible. And in terms of like pure business forms, it is, you know, the revenue each year around the world has grown and grown and growing. So, you know, if you're going to join the industry now, you're in a really good position, but try not to be overwhelmed by just everything that's going on. Just really focus on kind of, you know, who you are really, I think.
Cool. Now that's there's really great points there, Tom. I think I might bring this to a close unless anyone's got any really pertinent question they want to ask. Yes. We'll say thanks to my panelists.
Thank you, Mark.